Since March 2022, the majority of movie studios in Hollywood have officially shut down the distribution of their movies in Russia. Properties of Disney, Warner Brothers, Paramount, Universal, Columbia, and others are completely unavailable to see in Russian theaters. But this is only how things are on paper. In fact, all the movies from these big studios keep being released there almost simultaneously with the rest of the world. And those are not the awful quality cams, we're talking gorgeous theater projector image and crisp Dolby Atmos sound. So how are Russian theaters getting their hands on this content with all the movie studios clearly not giving them the rights to do so? Well, y'all better get your popcorn out, cause you're about to dive into one of the most insane movie piracy schemes that you've ever heard of. After spending some time in Moscow and watching movies in the theaters there, I'm gonna quickly break down the current state of the Russian cinema market, meaning what you still can see officially. Aside from the domestic production, which mostly consists of poorly made trash and war propaganda that praises their despicable invasion, you could watch the stuff from A24, so films like Marty Supreme or The Drama are 100% legit. A24 doesn't distribute its own property internationally, it would rather sell the movie rights to local distributors on a movie-to-movie basis. Lionsgate Films, on the contrary, hasn't gone anywhere since 2022, still keeping its long-standing output deal with Central Partnership, one of the biggest Russian distributors. That's how John Wick Chapter 4, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and Now You See Me 3 were officially available too. But obviously this is just a fraction of what's available compared to the rest of the world. Just like in many other countries, there's a high demand for the MCU movies, the latest and greatest from Christopher Nolan, the never-ending last fucking ride of Fast and Furious, the insane Mission Impossible series, the DCU, the beloved Pixar animation, the incredible Sony animation. I could literally go on for an hour just naming all of that. And despite all the sanctions by the US government that made all of those Paramounts, Universals, Disneys of the world shut down their own distribution branches on Russian soil overnight, all of their property is still present in Russian theaters as if nothing at all has ever happened. However, there is a tiny catch with all the unavailable stuff. You see, if you were to buy a ticket for Avatar 3 here, you wouldn't actually be paying to see Avatar 3. Instead, you'd be paying for a 10-minute Russian short film that just happens to have a 3-hour and 20-minute long movie before it. That's called a pre-session service, the scheme where people purchase tickets for content that has an official distribution certificate in Russia, and the Hollywood movie that plays before it is just considered a fucking pre-roll ad. This way, theaters are legally clean, since they aren't selling tickets for pirated films. But still, the main question is, how do the sanctioned movies get smuggled into the country for them to later be broadcasted as an ad before a short film? Well, before we uncover that, you can drop that totally legitimate like of yours down below if you're enjoying the video so far. And don't forget to subscribe to stay tuned for next videos in case you haven't done it already. I'm not going back to Russia anymore, so the next video will come out sooner than 8 months, I promise. So the way all those films make their way into Russia is because the theaters there receive DCPs which they unlock with KDMs, which were... okay, that's a little too complicated, right? Let's take a quick look how it normally works. There's a big movie studio, like Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers has a Supergirl movie coming up and wants to release it worldwide. Then there is the distributor, a company that acquires the rights to show Supergirl in the theaters of its country. Usually, big studios have their own distribution branches worldwide, like Warner Brothers Germany or the former Warner Brothers Russia. God rest its soul. And finally, we have the theaters themselves. They rent the Supergirl movie from the distributor. Once the film is about to come out, the distributor sends it to theaters as a digital cinema package, which is basically a compilation of encrypted files that ranges from 200 to 300 gigs. DCPs can be downloaded via satellite channel, yet they cannot be instantly accessed because the encryption. So they have to be decrypted. In order to get that done, the big movie studio creates a distribution key delivery message. I'm just gonna be calling it the master key, it's easier that way. So the big movie studio grants the master key to the distributor, which uses it to generate thousands of regular keys for each theater in the country. And those regular keys are just called key delivery messages. Each KDM contains the exact eligibility timeframe, and each one is tied to a specific theater projector, meaning that the KDM for hole 1 isn't gonna unlock the movie for hole 2, which is literally next door. So all of that sounds like a pretty reliable anti-piracy strategy, right? Russian theaters simply cannot steal a movie because it is a locked DCP that is inaccessible unless you have a KDM, and those KDMs are totally worthless too because they're tied to specific theater projectors in a different country. But what if I told you that there's someone out there who abuses the system and grants theaters in Russia unauthorized access to the unavailable films? Meet the countries of the former Soviet Union, the CIS. They are, of course, no longer dependent on Russia and have their own legal movie markets. But unlike in most of the European countries, major Hollywood studios don't have their branches there, so there's no such thing as Disney Armenia or Paramount Kazakhstan. You get the gist. Instead, there are several local distribution firms that have secured contracts to represent those studios and show their properties in small chains of theaters across Central Asia. Now, if we get back to that DCP and KDM system, this is where it diverges from its legal model. Some small private distributor illegally sends the DCP of Supergirl to the servers of Russian theaters and then, using the master key provided by Warner Brothers, creates KDMs that will unlock the movie on their projectors. This basically means that this distributor once signed multiple contracts with all those studios that clearly forbid unauthorized KDM generation for theaters outside of the distributor's coverage zone, but then they realized they could make much more money from the desperate theaters in Russia than from their own local ticket sales. Wait. More money from some shady stuff than from the legal business on their territory? Well, of course, what do you think makes more money? A cozy family restaurant in a peaceful neighborhood, or a drug lab in its basement? And since the movies released in the CIS are officially dubbed in Russian for the large number of Russian-speaking audiences there, not only the theaters in Russia get the perfect theatrical version of the films, but they also come fully translated in their native language. Ain't that a true win-win scenario for everyone? So, is there anything that goes back to the studios in this case? Absolutely nothing, they're just being robbed. The standard 50-50 split between a theater and a movie studio clearly doesn't work here. When the next Spider-Man movie is played as a pre-session service before some short film, Sony and Marvel won't get a single cent from the ticket sales. So now you might ask, aren't those studios aware that their property gets stolen left and right? How come they still haven't done anything about this? And they're 100% aware of this issue and can even identify the thief. It's just that their hands are kinda tied. If a sanctioned movie broadcasted in a Russian theater got filmed by someone and uploaded to the internet, the forensic watermarking baked in the image, which is totally invisible to our eyes, will be easily scanned by the studios, letting them know which projector was playing the film and which distributor fraudulently provided access to it. So now the way it can be handled boils down to just two options, and both of them suck for the studios. Option 1 is attempting to sue Russian theaters for piracy. And the keyword here is attempting. The studios no longer have any legal representation in the country, and the Russian court won't be bothered looking into a lawsuit from a foreign studio. Besides, the Russian government is totally fine with this fraud going in the country, cause this way theaters are able to pay taxes by earning lots of money from the illegal Hollywood premieres. Their domestic production alone is nowhere near those revenue numbers. So option 2 would be revoking the master key from the local distributor that is suspected of theft. It'll no longer be able to create any KDMs whatsoever, which means the Russian piracy will be dead, but so will be the entire 100% legitimate movie business in several CIS countries as well. The outcome? A loss of a vast market that would probably get taken by China, and local theaters will be suing you because they did nothing wrong, yet the films they had the rights to show were taken away from them. So, what would you choose in this scenario? Talk to a brick wall? Shoot yourself in the leg? Or maybe don't do anything at all and leave it as it is? Yeah, that's what I thought. So this is the movie-going experience in Russia. Now, obviously I didn't make this video with the intention to point out this huge problem for poor Hollywood studios that lose money on a daily basis because of that. I just found it really fascinating to explore how far a business would go in order to keep its head above water, which is exactly what those theaters have been doing this whole time. For now, it's quite hard to determine how much longer this system will be around for, but I think it's not gonna last long. The parts in theater projectors slowly degrade with each screening, and there are no new parts coming in because the projector manufacturers like Barco or Christie Digital are also no longer present in the country. Or maybe the studios will eventually come up with a better way of shutting the Russian theaters off. No one knows. There's another potential problem on the Russian side of the fence called government-controlled massive internet shutdown that is happening across the entire country. This way, simply ordering a ride home or paying by card becomes impossible. How can we even talk about downloading 300 gigs of content now? But right now, this whole system is functioning seamlessly, and it is for sure one of the most incredible cases of how to rob those giant multi-billion-dollar companies and get away with it. Drop a like, subscribe. See ya.